I was sitting in a cramped internet cafe in Lagos, Nigeria, trying to video call my dying mother one last time, when my stepbrother Kevin sent me a text that changed everything. House sold. $400,000. Mom would want me to have it. Don't come back. Just like that. 43 years of my life, everything I had ever called home, gone in a text message while I was 7,000 miles away burying my husband. But before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps give me the strength to speak my truth. Now let's get into my story. You have to understand something about that house on Magnolia Street. It wasn't just bricks and mortar to me. That was the house where my mama, my real mama who died when I was 12, had taught me to braid hair on the front porch, where she'd shown me how to make her famous peach cobbler, measuring ingredients with her hands instead of cups because cooking comes from the heart, baby girl, not from a recipe. When Mama married Roger when I was 14, I thought I was getting a father and a brother. Roger was kind enough and Kevin was only 2 years older than me, so I figured we'd grow up like real siblings. What I got instead was 28 years of being treated like a guest in my own home, like someone who was there on borrowed time and better not get too comfortable. But I stayed. Lord help me, I stayed because that house held every memory I had of my real mother, and because Roger had promised me on his deathbed 3 years ago that the house would be mine when the time came. Diane, he'd said, holding my hand with his liver-spotted fingers, you're the one who took care of your mama when she was sick. You're the one who's been taking care of me. This house belongs to you. Kevin had been there that day too, standing in the corner of the hospital room checking his phone while his father was dying. But he'd heard those words same as I did. Now here I was, 62 years old, widowed, and homeless because my stepbrother had decided that 40 years of me caring for his father didn't matter as much as his desire for quick cash. The internet connection in that cafe kept cutting out, so I couldn't get through to Mama's hospice room. I'd been trying for 3 days to video call her before she passed, but the time difference and the terrible connection made it almost impossible. My husband David's family had taken their time with the funeral arrangements. There had been complications with his death certificate, issues with the burial plot, family disputes over who should speak at the service. What should have been a week-long trip had stretched into 3 weeks. 3 weeks. That's all the time Kevin needed to swoop in like a vulture. I called the hospice directly from my hotel room that night, using the last of my international calling minutes. I'm sorry, Mrs. Williams, the nurse said gently, but your mother passed yesterday morning. She asked for you right at the end. She asked for me. While I was stuck in Nigeria dealing with David's family's drama, my mama died asking for me, and I wasn't there. Kevin was, though. Kevin was there to hold her hand and probably tell her all kinds of lies about why I hadn't come home. The funeral was scheduled for the day I was supposed to fly back to Atlanta. Kevin had made all the arrangements, or rather, his wife Sharon had made them, because Kevin never could organize anything more complicated than a takeout order. They'd chosen the cheapest casket, the shortest service, and a burial plot in a cemetery clear across town from where Roger was buried. When I called Kevin to discuss the arrangements, to ask why he hadn't waited for me to get home before making all these decisions, that's when he dropped the bomb about the house. I already sold it, Diane. Got a cash offer, had to move fast. The market's hot right now. You sold our mother's house without even talking to me? It's not our mother, Diane. It's my father's house, and he left it to me. I found the will. A will. Roger had never mentioned a will to me. In all our conversations about the house, about his wishes, about how I was the one who deserved it after everything I'd done, he'd never once mentioned putting anything in writing. Kevin, your father promised me that house. You heard him say it. People say a lot of things when they're dying, Diane, but legal documents don't lie. The house was in his name, and his will says everything goes to his biological son. Biological son. Like the 43 years I'd spent calling Roger Daddy meant nothing. Like the 43 years I'd spent taking care of that house, paying for repairs when Roger was too proud to ask Kevin for money, cooking Sunday dinners that Kevin showed up for maybe twice a year didn't count for anything. What about Mama's things? Her jewelry, her china, the quilts she made. Already donated most of it. Sharon said it was just taking up space. Donated. My mama's wedding ring, The one she'd worn for 37 years until the cancer made her fingers too swollen to keep it on. The quilts she'd stayed up nights making for my future grandchildren I never had because I'd spent my childbearing years taking care of everybody else. The china set she'd saved up for years to buy. The one she only brought out for Christmas and Easter. All of it gone to strangers. Kevin, I'm flying home tomorrow. Don't do anything else until I get there. There's nothing left to do, Diane. The new owners take possession next week. I'll have your stuff packed up and put in storage. You can pick it up when you figure out where you're going to live. Where I was going to live. At 62 years old, after spending my entire adult life in that house, I was supposed to figure out where to live like I was some college kid looking for an apartment. The flight from Lagos to Atlanta took 14 hours, but it felt like 14 years. I sat in that cramped middle seat, surrounded by strangers, thinking about everything I was flying home to lose. I thought about the garden I'd planted behind the house, tomatoes and collard greens, okra and peppers, herbs for cooking and flowers for beauty. I'd spent 20 years getting that soil just right, learning which plants grew best in which spots, creating something beautiful from nothing. I thought about the kitchen where I'd learned to cook, where I'd taught David to make cornbread when we were first married, where I'd spent countless hours preparing meals for family gatherings that Kevin and Sharon never bothered to attend. I thought about my bedroom, the room I'd shared with David during the 12 years of our marriage, the room where I'd cried when the doctors told us we'd never have children, the room where I'd held him during his final illness before he passed. All of it, sold to strangers for $400,000 while I was burying my husband. When I landed at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, I didn't even go to a hotel first. I took a taxi straight to Magnolia Street, hoping against hope that maybe this was all some terrible misunderstanding. But there it was. A big yellow sold banner stretched across the realtor's sign in the front yard. The garden was already torn up. Looked like the new owners were planning some kind of renovation. The front porch where Mama used to sit and wave at neighbors was stacked with boxes and furniture that Kevin must have pulled out of the house. My things. 43 years of my life, reduced to a pile of boxes sitting on a porch like garbage waiting to be collected. I walked up those familiar front steps one last time and knocked on the door that I shouldn't have had to knock on because it should have been my door. Kevin answered, and I barely recognized him. He'd put on weight since Roger's funeral, and he was wearing clothes that looked expensive. A silk shirt, designer jeans, shoes that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. Diane, you made it back. Kevin, we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. The sale's final. The paperwork's already filed. He stepped aside to let me in, but it was like walking into a stranger's house. All the furniture was different, new leather sofas, a big screen TV, fancy art on the walls. It looked like Kevin and Sharon had been redecorating with their windfall. Where's Sharon? I asked. At the spa. She's been working hard, getting the house ready for sale. Working hard. Sharon, who had visited Roger maybe 10 times in the 3 years he was sick. Sharon, who complained about the house being old-fashioned and too much work every time she set foot in it. Kevin, sit down. Please. Let me explain something to you. We sat on his new leather sofa, and I looked around at what used to be my living room. The walls where Mama's pictures used to hang were now covered with generic art, the kind of mass-produced paintings you buy at furniture stores. The corner where Roger's old recliner used to sit was now occupied by some modern chair that looked like it belonged in a magazine but not in a home. Your father promised me this house, I said quietly. Multiple times. In front of witnesses. Diane, I know you took care of him and I appreciate that. But promises aren't legally binding. The will is clear. Let me see it. See what? The will. Let me see this will that says you get everything. Kevin shifted uncomfortably. It's with my lawyer. Then call your lawyer. Have him fax it over. I want to see the document that says a man who called me his daughter for 43 years left me nothing. Diane, you're upset. I understand. But this is just how it is. I studied my stepbrother's face. Really looked at him for maybe the first time in years. There was something there, something shifty in his eyes that reminded me of the way he used to look when we were teenagers and he'd been caught in a lie. Kevin, did Roger even have a will? The silence stretched between us like a gulf. Of course he had a will. Because, I was the one who took him to all his doctor's appointments. I was the one who handled his finances when he got too confused to do it himself. I was the one who sat with him at the lawyer's office when he was getting his affairs in order. Kevin's face had gone pale. And in all that time, Kevin, in all those meetings with lawyers and accountants and financial advisors, I never once heard anyone mention a will leaving everything to you. Well, maybe he didn't want to upset you. Or maybe there is no will, and you just decided to take what you thought you could get away with while I was out of the country and couldn't stop you. Kevin stood up abruptly. I think you should go, Diane. You're obviously emotional right now, and you're not thinking clearly. Oh, I'm thinking very clearly. Clearer than I have in a long time. I stood up too, and for the first time since I'd gotten that terrible text message, I felt something other than grief and shock. I felt anger. Clean, pure, righteous anger. You know what the funny thing is, Kevin? I was going to let you have half. Even though your father promised me this house, even though I'm the one who earned it by taking care of him all these years, I was going to offer you half of whatever we sold it for, because that's what family does. Diane. But you couldn't wait. You couldn't show me that basic respect. You had to swoop in like some kind of scavenger and take everything while I was grieving my husband. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. You know, Kevin, your father used to say that patience was a virtue, that good things come to people who wait, who do the right thing even when it's hard. What's that supposed to mean? I smiled at him, the first genuine smile I'd felt in weeks. It means, baby boy, that you might want to be real careful about spending that money too fast. Because sometimes when you're in such a hurry to grab what you think you deserve, you might miss the bigger picture. I left him standing in that living room, surrounded by his new furniture and his guilty conscience, and walked back out to the taxi that was still waiting for me. As we drove away from Magnolia Street, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in over a year. Matthews, Peterson and Associates. This is Janet. Janet, this is Diane Williams. Is Mr. Matthews available? I need to discuss a trust fund that may have been activated by my mother's death. Oh, Mrs. Williams. We've been trying to reach you. Yes, please hold for Mr. Matthews. He's been waiting for your call. As I sat in that taxi watching my childhood home disappear in the rear window, I thought about something my real mama used to tell me when I was little and impatient for Christmas morning. Good things come to those who wait, baby girl. But the best things come to those who wait and pay attention. I've been paying attention for 62 years. And Kevin was about to learn that sometimes the house isn't the real prize. It's just the distraction that keeps you from seeing what's really valuable. The taxi turned the corner, and Magnolia Street was gone. But for the first time since I'd gotten Kevin's text, I wasn't crying. I was planning. Mr. Matthews looked exactly the same as he had 15 years ago when Mama first brought me to his office. A distinguished black man in his 70s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. But the news he was about to share would change everything I thought I knew about my family. Mrs. Williams, please sit down. I'm so sorry for your loss, and I apologize that we couldn't reach you sooner about your mother's trust. Trust. That word hung in the air between us like a prayer I'd been waiting my whole life to hear answered. Mr. Matthews, I don't understand. What trust? He opened a thick file folder with my mama's name written on the tab in careful handwriting. Your mother established this trust in 1995, shortly after she married Roger. She was very specific about the terms. It was to remain completely private until after her death, and the funds were only to be released to you. That was 3 years after Mama married Roger, right around the time I graduated high school and was thinking about college. Right around the time money was tight and Mama kept saying we'd figure out a way for me to get my education. She never told me about any trust. She didn't want you to know. Your mother was adamant about that. She said she wanted you to build your own character, make your own way in the world, without relying on money you hadn't earned. Mr. Matthews smiled softly. She was very proud of the woman you became, Mrs. Williams. She said you had integrity, that you took care of people because it was right, not because you expected something in return. My eyes filled with tears thinking about Mama watching me all those years, seeing me care for Roger when he got sick, seeing me put my own dreams on hold to make sure he was comfortable. She'd seen me do it all without knowing there was a safety net waiting for me. How much are we talking about, Mr. Matthews? He slid a document across his desk. The trust was initially funded with $500,000 from your mother's life insurance policy, the one she had from her job at the phone company. Over the past 28 years, with careful investment and compound interest, it has grown to just over $2.1 million. $2.1 million. I stared at that number on the paper, trying to make sense of it. While I was clipping coupons and working double shifts to help pay Roger's medical bills, while I was putting off my own needs to make sure Kevin had money for his various failed business ventures, while I was watching Kevin sell our family home for $400,000 like it was some kind of windfall, there had been over $2 million sitting in an account with my name on it. Mrs. Williams? Are you all right? I'm sorry, this is a lot to process. You said Mama set this up in 1995. Yes. She came to me about 6 months after she married Roger. She was concerned about blending families, about making sure you would always have security no matter what happened to her new marriage. That sounded like Mama. Always thinking ahead. Always protecting me even when I didn't know I needed protection. She was particularly worried about Roger's son Kevin. She said he was, how did she put it? Entitled and irresponsible. She wanted to make sure you'd be taken care of if anything happened to her, especially if Kevin inherited Roger's assets. Mama had seen right through Kevin even back then. She'd watched him come around only when he needed money, watched him treat Roger more like a bank than a father, and she'd made sure I'd have something that Kevin could never touch. There are some specific conditions to the trust, Mr. Matthews continued. The funds can't be released until after your mother's death. And there's a provision that states if anyone contests your mother's final wishes regarding her personal property, her jewelry, furniture, personal belongings, the trust amount doubles. Doubles? Your mother was very specific about that clause. She said if anyone in the family tried to prevent you from inheriting her personal items, it would prove they were more interested in money than in honoring her memory. I thought about Kevin donating all of Mama's things to charity, throwing away 40 years of memories like they were garbage. By his greed and disrespect, he just cost himself. Well, he just made me twice as wealthy as Mama had originally intended. So the trust is now worth $4.2 million. Plus the house. I'm sorry, what about the house? Mr. Matthews looked confused. Mrs. Williams, didn't you know? Your mother owned that house. She bought it from Roger in 1998 when he was having financial difficulties. The deed is in her name only. The room started spinning. But Kevin said Roger left him the house in his will. Roger couldn't leave Kevin something he didn't own. Your mother bought that house outright and never transferred the deed back to Roger. According to her will, which she updated just last year, the house belongs to you. Kevin had sold a house that wasn't his to sell. Kevin had committed fraud. Mr. Matthews, Kevin sold that house 3 weeks ago. He said he had a will from Roger giving him everything. Mr. Matthews frowned and opened another file. Mrs. Williams, Roger died without a will. I know because I tried to convince him to write one several times over the years, but he kept putting it off. He died intestate, which means his personal belongings would have gone to Kevin as his biological son, but the house was never his to leave to anyone. So Kevin forged documents? It appears that way. The sale he conducted was fraudulent. As the rightful owner of the property, you can have the sale voided and the buyers can sue Kevin for their money back. I sat back in that leather chair, trying to process everything I just learned. In the span of 30 minutes, I'd gone from being a homeless widow to being a millionaire property owner. More importantly, I'd learned that my mama had been protecting me my whole life, even after she was gone. What do I need to do? Well, first we need to file an injunction to stop the new owners from taking possession of the house. Then we'll need to present the real deed to prove your ownership. The buyers will get their money back and Kevin will likely face criminal charges for fraud. And the trust money? That can be transferred to accounts of your choosing immediately. Your mother left very clear instructions that you should use this money to live the life you deserve, to travel, to pursue dreams you may have put aside. She specifically mentioned that you'd spent too many years taking care of other people, and not enough time taking care of yourself. Even from the grave, Mama was still taking care of me. I left Mr. Matthews' office with a briefcase full of documents and a head full of plans. The first thing I did was check into the nicest hotel in downtown Atlanta. The kind of place I'd driven past 1,000 times but never imagined I'd be able to afford. The suite was beautiful, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and a marble bathroom bigger than the bedroom I'd shared with David. I ordered room service. Not because I was hungry, but because I could. Then I sat on that plush sofa and called Kevin. Diane? Where are you staying? I've got your boxes in the garage, but Sharon wants them gone by tomorrow. Kevin, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think real carefully before you answer. What? That will you said Roger left. The one that gave you the house. Have you shown it to anyone? Your lawyer, the real estate agent, the buyers? There was a pause. A long pause that told me everything I needed to know. Why would you ask me that? Because I just came from Mr. Matthews' office, Kevin. You remember Mr. Matthews, don't you? Mama's lawyer? The one who's had the deed to that house in Mama's name for the past 25 years. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. Kevin? You still there? Diane, I can explain. Oh, I bet you can. I bet you've got all kinds of explanations. Like how you thought you could sell a house that never belonged to Roger in the first place. Like how you thought you could forge legal documents and nobody would ever find out. I didn't forge anything. I found some old papers in Dad's desk and I thought. You thought wrong, baby boy. You thought real wrong. I could hear Sharon in the background asking Kevin what was wrong, who he was talking to. Kevin, let me explain something to you. Tomorrow morning, Mr. Matthews is filing an injunction to stop the sale of that house. The buyers are going to want their $400,000 back, and they're going to want it from you, since you're the one who defrauded them. Diane, please. I made a mistake. I can fix this. No, Kevin. You can't fix this. But I can. What do you mean? I looked out at the city lights, thinking about Mama's trust fund, thinking about the house that was rightfully mine, thinking about 43 years of taking care of people who never appreciated it. I mean, I'm going to give you a choice. You can face criminal charges for fraud, explain to a judge why you thought you could sell property that didn't belong to you, and probably spend the next few years in prison. Or you can pack up all that new furniture you bought with my money and get out of my house by Sunday. You can return every penny of that $400,000 to the buyers, and you can publicly apologize for the misunderstanding about the ownership of the property. Diane, I don't have $400,000. We spent some of it. I know you did. I saw the new furniture, the new clothes, Sharon's spa treatments. You've been living it up on money you stole. It wasn't stealing. I thought. Kevin, I don't care what you thought. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to take out a loan or sell everything you bought, or figure out some other way to get that money back to those people. Because if you don't, I'm going to let Mr. Matthews file those criminal charges and you can explain to a jury why you thought forging documents was a reasonable thing to do. I could hear Sharon in the background getting louder, demanding to know what was happening. You have until Sunday, Kevin. Sunday at noon. I want you and Sharon and all your belongings out of my house. I want my mama's jewelry, her quilts, her china. Everything you donated, I want it back. And I want a written apology that I can show to the neighbors who watched you sell their friend's house while her daughter was burying her husband. Diane, be reasonable. Some of that stuff is already gone. Then you better find it. You better call every charity in Atlanta if you have to. 'Cause Kevin, let me tell you something else. The trust fund Mama left me, the one she set up because she knew exactly what kind of person you were. Every day you delay giving me back her belongings. Every day you make this harder than it has to be. That trust fund grows. What trust fund? I smiled, even though he couldn't see me. The one worth $4.2 million that you just triggered by disrespecting Mama's memory. The one that's going to let me live very comfortably for the rest of my life, while you're trying to figure out how to pay back money you never should have taken. The phone went quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. $4 million? $4.2 million. And Kevin, that's just the beginning. Because tomorrow I'm also going to call David's insurance company and let them know that his widow is no longer homeless and destitute. Turns out there are some benefits I'm entitled to that I never bothered to claim when I thought I needed to be humble and grateful. Diane. Sunday, Kevin. Noon. Don't make me call the police to escort you out. I hung up the phone and ordered another bottle of wine from room service. Then I called Mrs. Patterson, my old neighbor, the one who'd always kept an eye on things when I was taking care of Roger. Mrs. Patterson? It's Diane Williams. I'm coming home. Oh honey, I heard about what Kevin did. I'm so sorry. If there's anything I can do. Actually, there is something. How would you like to make a little extra money helping me redecorate? Seems I've got some furniture to get rid of and a house to make beautiful again. Diane, I don't understand. You will, Mrs. Patterson. Come Sunday afternoon, you surely will. After I hung up with her, I sat in that hotel suite and thought about Mama. About how she'd protected me even when I didn't know I needed protection. About how she'd seen Kevin's character clearly 28 years ago, and made sure he could never hurt me the way he'd tried to. I thought about David, about how proud he'd be to know that his careful, patient wife was finally going to get everything she deserved. And I thought about Sunday afternoon, when I'd walk back into my house, and start living the life Mama had always wanted me to have. The life where I took care of myself for a change. Sunday morning came with the kind of crisp October sunshine that makes everything look like a promise of better days ahead. I stood on the front porch of my house, at exactly 11:45 a.m., watching Kevin and Sharon load boxes into a rented U-Haul truck with all the enthusiasm of people attending their own funeral. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of legal paperwork, phone calls, and what I can only describe as divine intervention. Mr. Matthews had worked miracles, contacting every charity in the Atlanta area until we tracked down Mama's belongings. Turns out, most of them were still sitting in a warehouse waiting to be processed because Kevin had been too lazy to properly document the donation. Mrs. Patterson stood beside me, shaking her head as we watched Sharon throw boxes into the truck with obvious fury. That girl's been stomping around here since Thursday like she owns the place, Mrs. Patterson said. Had the nerve to ask me if I knew any cheap apartments in the area. I told her I didn't associate with thieves. I smiled, adjusting the keys to my house in my hand. The same keys Kevin had apparently been planning to keep, judging by the way he'd fought the locksmith who came to change the locks yesterday. At noon exactly, I walked up to the truck where Kevin was struggling with a heavy box that looked suspiciously like it might contain Mama's china. That's not yours, I said quietly. Kevin looked up, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool weather. He'd lost weight in the past few days, stress, I imagined, combined with the reality of having to pay back $400,000 he'd already spent. It's just some dishes, Diane. Sharon needs something to eat off of. Sharon can buy her own dishes. With her own money. Sharon chose that moment to come storming out of the house, carrying what looked like one of Mama's quilts. This is ridiculous, she shouted. It's just old junk. Why can't we keep some of it? I walked over to her calmly and held out my hand, because that old junk was hand-stitched by my mother over the course of 2 years. Because every stitch represents hours of love and care that you never bothered to appreciate when she was alive. It's just a blanket. No, Sharon. It's a family heirloom. And you're not family. Mrs. Patterson stepped forward. Honey, I think you better give the lady her Mama's quilt before she calls the police. Again. Kevin had indeed called the police Friday night, claiming I was harassing them. The officer who responded took one look at the deed in my name, the court injunction, and Kevin's inability to produce any legitimate ownership documents, and told Kevin he had until Sunday to vacate or face trespassing charges. Diane, Kevin said, setting down the box. Can we talk? Privately. I looked at my stepbrother, really looked at him. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by an old t-shirt and jeans that had seen better days. The cocky attitude had been replaced by something that looked almost like humility. Almost. We can talk right here. Please. 5 minutes. I nodded to Mrs. Patterson, who took the quilt from Sharon's reluctant hands. 5 minutes, Kevin. We walked to the edge of the front yard, away from Sharon's glaring and Mrs. Patterson's protective hovering. Diane, I'm sorry. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. Do you? Do you really know? I was scared, okay? When Dad died, I realized I didn't have anything. No savings, no real job. Sharon was pregnant. Sharon's pregnant? Kevin nodded miserably. 3 months. We found out right after Dad's funeral. I panicked. I thought if I could sell the house quickly, we'd have enough money to get stable, maybe buy a small place of our own. A baby. Sharon was having a baby, and Kevin had thought stealing from me was the solution to his financial problems. Kevin, if you just talked to me, if you'd explained the situation instead of lying and stealing, maybe we could have worked something out. You would have helped us? I don't know. Maybe. But you didn't give me that chance, did you? You decided to take what you thought you could get away with while I was 7,000 miles away burying my husband. Kevin looked down at his shoes. I know. It was wrong. It wasn't just wrong, Kevin. It was cruel. Do you have any idea what it felt like to get that text message while I was sitting in that internet cafe, trying to call Mama one last time before she died? I didn't think. No, you didn't think. You didn't think about anyone but yourself. Just like you've been doing your whole life. We stood there in silence for a moment, watching Sharon and Mrs. Patterson engage in what appeared to be a staring contest over a box of Mama's jewelry. Diane, what happens now? I studied my stepbrother's face, seeing for maybe the first time the scared little boy he'd always been underneath all that bravado. Now you face the consequences of your choices. You pay back the people you defrauded. You figure out how to support your family without stealing from other people. You grow up. And us? Are we? Can we still be family? That question hung in the air between us like smoke. Family. For 43 years I'd considered Kevin family despite his selfishness, despite his disrespect, despite the way he treated Roger more like an ATM than a father. I'd made excuses for him, covered for him, even given him money when he needed it because that's what family does. But family doesn't sell your childhood home while you're burying your spouse. Family doesn't throw away your mother's memories like garbage. Family doesn't forge documents and commit fraud, and then act surprised when there are consequences. Kevin, you want to know what family really means? Family means showing up. Family means sacrifice. Family means putting other people's needs ahead of your own sometimes, even when it's hard. I gestured toward the house, toward Mrs. Patterson, who was now carefully inventorying every item to make sure nothing was missing. Family means taking care of people when they're sick, even when they can't remember your name. Family means sitting with someone during their last days, holding their hand, making sure they're not afraid. Family means honoring people's memories after they're gone. Kevin was crying now, which surprised me. I hadn't seen him cry since we were teenagers. I want to do better, Diane. I want to be better. Then start by being honest. Start by taking responsibility. Start by treating people with respect instead of seeing them as things you can use. Will you? Will you help me? Not with money, he added quickly, seeing my expression. But maybe you could teach me how to be the kind of person Dad wanted me to be. I looked at this man who had caused me so much pain, who had betrayed me in the deepest way possible, and I saw something I'd never seen before, genuine remorse. Not just regret for getting caught, but actual understanding of the hurt he'd caused. Kevin, I'll make you a deal. You get your life together. Get a real job, pay back every penny you stole. Prove that you can be responsible for yourself and your family, and maybe we can talk about what family means. How long? A year. You have 1 year to show me that you've learned something from this mess. That you can be the man your father believed you could be. Kevin nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. And the criminal charges? That depends on whether those buyers get their money back. All of it. With interest. I'll find a way. You better. Because Kevin, I want you to understand something. This isn't me being mean or vindictive. This is me finally learning the difference between being kind and being a doormat. Mama's trust fund didn't just give me financial security. It gave me the freedom to stop accepting less than I deserve. Sharon appeared at Kevin's shoulder, impatience radiating from every line of her body. Are we done here? The truck's loaded, and I want to get to the new place before dark. I looked at Sharon, really looked at her for the first time. She was younger than I'd realized, maybe 28 or 30, with tired eyes and the kind of stress lines that come from financial worry. Pregnant with her first child. Married to a man who just lost everything they thought they had. Sharon, I said gently, congratulations on the baby. She looked surprised, like kindness was the last thing she'd expected from me. Thank you. Kevin made some bad choices, but that doesn't mean your child should suffer for them. If you need help with prenatal care, with finding resources, you call me. The baby didn't ask for any of this. Sharon's hostility cracked just slightly. You'd help us? After everything. I'd help an innocent child, yes, Because that's what decent people do. Kevin and Sharon finished loading the truck and drove away just as the sun was setting behind the old oak tree in my front yard. Mrs. Patterson and I stood on the porch, watching the U-Haul disappear around the corner. "Well," Mrs. Patterson said, "that's that." "Yes," I said, fingering Mama's house keys. "That's that." But it wasn't really the end. It was the beginning. Over the next month, I slowly transformed the house back into a home. I hired a team to restore the garden that had been torn up, planting not just vegetables but flowers, roses and daffodils and all the beautiful and practical things Mama had always wanted but never felt she could afford. I had the kitchen remodeled, keeping all the charm but adding modern conveniences. I turned Roger's old workshop into an art studio, something I dreamed of for years but never thought possible. I bought a piano not because I could play, but because I wanted to learn, and at 62, I finally had the time and resources to pursue dreams I'd put aside. Most importantly, I started having people over again. Real dinners, not the obligatory family gatherings that used to feel more like duty than joy. Mrs. Patterson and her sister. People from church. The neighbors who had watched Kevin sell my house and wondered if they'd ever see me again. 3 months later, I got a call from Kevin. He'd found work as a mechanic. Honest work that required him to show up every day and earn his pay. Sharon had qualified for public assistance for her prenatal care, and they were living in a small apartment but making their rent on time. "Diane, I wanted to call and tell you that we paid back another $50,000 to the buyers. We're down to $180,000 left to go." "That's good, Kevin. I'm proud of you for working so hard." Sharon wanted me to ask, "Would you maybe like to come to the baby's ultrasound appointment? We're finding out if it's a boy or a girl." I thought about that for a long moment, about forgiveness and family and the difference between enabling someone's bad behavior and supporting their efforts to change. "I'd like that," I said. "I'd like that very much." 6 months later, I held my grandniece for the first time. Little Angela, named after my mama, at Kevin's request. She was perfect, with tiny fingers that gripped mine like she never wanted to let go. Kevin had changed. Not completely. People don't transform overnight. But enough that I could see the man Roger had always hoped he'd become. He was working 2 jobs to pay back the money faster, had enrolled in night classes to learn bookkeeping, was treating Sharon with the kind of respect and partnership that comes from facing hard times together. As I rocked Angela in Mama's old rocking chair, the one I'd recovered from that charity warehouse, I thought about the trust fund that had given me the power to demand justice, and the wisdom to temper that justice with mercy. Mama had protected me in ways I'd never imagined, but more than that, she taught me that real strength comes not from wealth or power, but from knowing your own worth and refusing to accept less than you deserve. The house on Magnolia Street was quiet now, but it was a peaceful quiet. The kind that comes from being exactly where you belong, surrounded by things you love, living the life you've earned through decades of putting others first and finally learning to put yourself first too. Kevin still had 7 months left to prove himself, and $180,000 left to repay. But he was doing the work, and that mattered. Angela would grow up with a father who understood the value of honesty and hard work, because he'd learned what happened when you chose the easy path over the right path. And I would grow old in the house that love built. Mama's love, Roger's love, and finally my own love for myself. The trust fund had given me financial security, but the real treasure was the lesson it taught me. That I was worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth the kind of fierce love that plans for your future even after death. Every Sunday I still cook a big dinner, but now only people who truly want to be there get invited. The table is smaller, but the conversation is richer. The laughter is genuine. The love is real. And when little Angela gets older, I'll tell her about her great-grandmother who taught me that the most important trust fund isn't the one in the bank. It's the one you build in your own heart, filled with self-respect and the knowledge that you never, ever have to accept less than you deserve. That's the inheritance that really matters. And that's the one I plan to pass on.